Welcome in, everyone, to this deep dive. We're going to get into Holi today.
Right.
And I'm really excited about this one. This is going to be, I think, a really interesting topic. We're going off of the Wikipedia article for this one. And yeah, I'm really excited to dive into this.
Yeah, this should be fun. I think that Holi is a really fascinating festival because it has all these ancient traditions, but it still feels so modern and celebratory.
Nay, and it's so visual, too,
Yeah, the colors.
with all the colors, exactly. So, like, when you think about Holi, that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind, I feel like. But so let's just jump right into it. What is Holi exactly?
So Holi is a major Hindu festival, and it's celebrated mainly in India and also by people of Indian descent all around the world.
Hmm.
And it's known for its vibrant colors, of course,
Hmm.
but it also celebrates love and the arrival of spring and the victory of good over evil.
Okay, so already a lot going on there. And I know you mentioned it's mostly celebrated in India and by the Indian diaspora, but are there other names for it? Or, like, is it celebrated under other names in other places?
Yeah, so it's actually got a few different names, depending on where you are.
Hmm.
For example, in Bengal, it's called Dol Jatra, which means swing festival.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And in the Caribbean, it's known as Fagua.
Okay, so even just in the names, you can kind of get a sense of, like, some of the different aspects of the celebration.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really interesting. Okay, so we've got all of these themes already of, like, good versus evil and love and spring and new beginnings. Is there, like, a specific time of year when Holi is celebrated?
Yeah, so Holi always falls on the full moon day, which is called Purnima of the Hindu lunar month Falguna. And that usually means it lands somewhere in the middle of March.
Oh, okay, so it does tie in really directly with that, like, springtime, sense of renewal.
Exactly. It's all about new beginnings and fresh starts.
Yeah, it's like nature itself is kind of prompting us to, have this fresh start.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also connected to the hope for a good harvest.
Oh, interesting. So there's that tied to the agricultural cycle as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so I have to ask, when I think about Holi, the first thing that comes to mind is those pictures and videos you see of people throwing all those vibrant colors. Where does that fit into everything we've been talking about?
Right. Well, the colors are a huge part of Holi, for sure. And they're not just random. They each have their own symbolism.
Okay, so there's meaning behind the colors. I'm really curious to hear more about that. But before we get into the colors themselves, I think it would be helpful to understand the stories behind Holi. I know there's a lot of mythology associated with this festival.
Yes, exactly.
Hmm.
There are a few key legends that are connected with Holi, and each one sort of teaches its own lesson and has its own symbols.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, so let's hear them.
So one of the most well-known stories is the one about Radha and Krishna. Now, Krishna is known for having a dark complexion, and he was worried that Radha, who had very fair skin, wouldn't be attracted to him.
Oh.
So his mother kind of jokingly suggested that he should just color Radha's face to match his own.
Oh, so that's where the color throwing comes from?
Yeah, exactly. That's what he did.
Okay, so that's a really sweet story, and it kind of sets the tone for, like, this playful and, loving kind of energy.
It does. It really captures the spirit of Holi. It's playful, it's vibrant, and it's ultimately about love and connection.
I love that. Are the other legends tied to this, like, playful energy as well?
Not all of them. The story of Holika and Prahlada is a bit more serious. This one is about good versus evil.
Oh, okay.
And it involves a young boy, Prahlada, who is incredibly devoted to the god Vishnu. But his father is a demon king, and he's not happy about Prahlada's devotion. So the king's sister, Holika, she tries to trick Prahlada into burning with her in a huge fire.
Oh, no.
But she has this magic cloak that's supposed to protect her from the flames.
Okay.
But as they sit in the fire, the cloak actually flies off of Holika and instead shields Prahlada.
Wow, talk about a plot twist.
Yeah, so Holika dies, and Prahlada survives completely unharmed.
So this story is about, like, the triumph of good over evil, basically.
Exactly. And it's actually reenacted in the Holika Dahan bonfire that takes place on the night before Holi.
Oh, wow, so there's a bonfire, too.
Yeah. It's a really powerful symbol of burning away all the negativity,
Oh.
Getting rid of the bad stuff to make room for something new.
Oh, that's really interesting. So the bonfire is like a ritualistic cleansing, kind of.
Yeah, you can think of it that way.
That's really cool. Okay, so we've got the story of Radha and Krishna, and then the story of Holika and Prahlada. Are there any other important legends tied to Holi?
There's one more that's worth mentioning. It's the story of Kamadeva and Shiva. So Kamadeva is the god of love, and he's asked to help reunite Shiva with his wife Parvati.
Okay.
But Shiva is deep in meditation. When Kamadeva tries to awaken his feelings with a love arrow, Shiva accidentally burns Kamadeva to ashes with his third eye.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tragic love story. But after a lot of pleading from Kamadeva's wife and Parvati Shiva, Shiva eventually brings Kamadeva back to life.
Oh, okay. So there's a happy ending at least.
Yeah, in the end, yes.
Yeah.
And this story is sometimes connected with Holi's as well. It shows how the festival celebrates all these different facets of love and devotion.
It's so interesting how these different stories are all woven together into this one celebration. It's like Holi encompasses all these different aspects of human experience, love, loss, devotion, the battle between good and evil.
Yeah, you're right. It's a very multifaceted festival.
So we've talked about the legends now. I'm really curious to learn how these stories actually play out in the way people celebrate Holi. What would our listener expect to see if they were to witness it firsthand?
Well, we already mentioned the Holika Dahan bonfire, right, which happens the night before the main festivities.
Right, so the bonfire is kind of like setting the stage.
Yeah, exactly. And that night is actually called Choti Holi, which means Little Holi.
Okay, so it's like a warm-up for the main event.
Yeah, you could say that. But then the main day of Holi is called Rangwali Holi, or Duleti, and that's when things really get colorful.
Okay, so that's when the color throwing happens.
Exactly. It's all about letting loose and embracing the joy of spring.
So can you paint us a picture? What actually happens during this Rangwali Holi celebration?
So just imagine people of all ages out in the streets throwing these vibrant powders called gulal at each other and drenching each other with water.
Wow, sounds like a blast.
It is. There's music, there's dancing, and this feeling of pure joy in the air. It's a really immersive experience. You just kind of surrender to the moment.
That's awesome. But is it just all chaotic fun, or is there like a deeper meaning behind all of this revelry?
There's definitely a deeper cultural and social significance here. While it might look chaotic from the outside, it actually serves a really important purpose.
Oh, okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So Holi is also a time for forgiveness renewal and strengthening social bonds. It's a day where people put aside their differences, let go of past grievances, and come together as a community.
That's really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I love that idea of using this celebration as a way to like reset relationships and foster unity.
Yeah, it's really powerful.
What do you think makes this aspect of Holi so effective?
I think it's the combination of the symbolism and the shared experience. So the colors aren't just pretty, they actually represent the blurring of social distinctions.
Oh, interesting.
When everyone is covered in the same vibrant hues, it's a visual metaphor for equality and unity.
That's so cool. I never thought about it that way.
And that shared experience is key. When people come together to laugh, dance, and literally paint each other with joy, it creates a sense of connection that goes beyond social hierarchies or personal differences.
It's like Holi is creating a temporary utopia where everyone is equal and connected through this shared experience of joy and color.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's like a social reset button, a chance to start fresh with a renewed sense of community.
That's really powerful. And it makes me think about how Holi is being celebrated more and more outside of India. It's like this ancient tradition is resonating with people all over the world.
It is. It's really fascinating to see how Holi is making its mark globally. But before we get into that, I think we should take a closer look at those colors themselves.
Oh, yes, the colors. I'm so curious to learn where they come from. Are they all natural?
Traditionally, they were. Those vibrant hues were actually derived from natural sources, like flowers, fruits, and herbs.
Really? Wow, that's incredible. So, like, what are some examples?
Well, for example, the reds and oranges, those fiery colors, came from the flame of the forest tree,
Oh, wow.
which blooms right before Holi.
So it's like nature is providing the perfect colors for the celebration.
It really is.
Mm,
And the green came from henna, which you might know is also used for body art,
right.
and that bright yellow color that's turmeric, a common spice in Indian cuisine.
Wow, so they really use what was available to them from the earth.
Yeah, exactly. They were
Yeah.
very resourceful. And it adds another layer of meaning to the celebration. You know, it connects it back to nature and the bounty of spring.
Absolutely. But I'm guessing that in the modern world, things aren't always so simple. Have synthetic dyes replaced these natural colors?
Yeah, unfortunately that has happened. While mass-produced synthetic dyes have made the colors more readily available, there are concerns about their impact on health and the environment.
That's a bummer. But seems like a common theme with so many traditions, trying to balance the old ways with the convenience of modern technology.
It is a constant challenge. But thankfully, there's a growing movement towards going back to the natural, plant-based colors for Holi.
Oh, that's good to hear. It seems like people are becoming more aware of the potential downsides of synthetic dyes.
Definitely.
Yeah.
There's a growing awareness of the need to celebrate responsibly.
So before we move on to talking about Holi's global impact, let's take a quick break to let everything we've learned so far sink in. All right, so we're back and ready to talk about how Holi is kind of gone beyond India and become more of a global thing.
Yeah, it really has spread, hasn't it?
It has. And I'm
Hmm.
I'm curious, like, what do you think has sparked this wider interest in Holi?
Well, I think there are a few things going on. I mean, as people of Indian descent have moved all over the world, and they've obviously brought their traditions with them.
Right.
And Holi is so, vibrant and full of energy, and it has these universal themes of, joy and togetherness. It makes sense that it would capture people's attention.
Yeah, it's like Holi has this inherent appeal that goes beyond any specific culture or background.
Exactly. It speaks to that human need for connection,
Yeah.
for letting go of inhibitions and celebrating life. And I think that resonates with people everywhere.
Especially in a world that feels so digital and divided sometimes.
Yeah, I think you're right. People are craving these kinds of experiences that bring us together. And Holi offers that. It's a collective moment of pure joy and release.
It's like a shared experience that you can't really get anywhere else.
Yeah, exactly.
But I imagine this global embrace of Holi hasn't been without its challenges, right? I'm thinking specifically about the issue of cultural appropriation.
That's a really important point. While it's amazing to see Holi celebrated all over the world, it's crucial to approach it with sensitivity and understanding. That line between appreciation and appropriation can be really blurry.
Yeah, it's definitely something we need to be talking about. How do we ensure that the cultural and spiritual significance of Holi isn't lost or distorted as it spreads to new places and cultures?
Well, I think education is key.
Yeah.
People need to understand the origins, the symbolism, the deeper meaning behind the festival. It's not just about throwing colors around.
Right, it's about connecting with those values and traditions that Holi represents.
Exactly.
So it's about appreciating the whole picture, not just cherry-picking the fun parts.
Yeah, and that makes me think about all those Holi-inspired events that have popped up all over the world. The color runs and the music festivals and stuff like that. It's kind of a mixed bag.
What do you mean?
Well, some of these events do a good job of incorporating educational elements and being respectful of Holi's cultural roots. But then there are others that just feel like commodification. They reduce Holi to a spectacle without really acknowledging its deeper meaning.
It's like that age-old struggle between sharing something beautiful and exploiting it for profit.
Right. And it raises questions about who benefits from these events. Are they truly fostering cultural exchange, or are they just capitalizing on a trend?
It seems like we need a lot of nuance and awareness to navigate this kind of cultural landscape.
Definitely. And it's an ongoing learning process. We need to be open to dialogue,
Yeah.
to listening to the voices of people who consider Holi a sacred tradition. And we need to be constantly examining our own intentions.
It's about moving beyond just surface-level appreciation to a deeper understanding and respect for the cultural richness that Holi represents.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of deeper understanding can only enrich our experience of Holi, whether we're celebrating it in its traditional context or exploring its adaptations in other cultures.
It's a good reminder that true cultural exchange is a two-way street. It's built on mutual respect and a willingness to learn from each other.
Absolutely. And speaking of Holi's evolution and adaptation, it's interesting to think about how the festival itself has changed over time, even within India.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, Holi's been around for centuries, right?
It has. Its
Yeah.
roots actually stretch back to before the Common Era. Some scholars believe it might have started as a fertility ritual connected to the cycles of nature and the anticipation of good harvests.
That makes a lot of sense considering how tied it is to springtime and the agricultural calendar.
Right. And then as Hinduism developed, Holi gradually incorporated different myths and legends. So it started to take on more religious and cultural significance, in addition to its existing celebration of spring and renewal.
So it's like it's become this tapestry woven from different threads of history, mythology, and cultural practices.
Yeah, I like that analogy. And that tapestry is still evolving today. Different regions of India have their own unique ways of celebrating Holi. It reflects the diversity of the country's cultural landscape.
So there's no one right way to celebrate Holi, even within India.
Exactly. In some areas, the festivities are really boisterous and high energy. The focus is on the color throwing and the revelry. But in other places, the celebrations are more subdued and spiritual. They might focus more on religious rituals and the symbolic meaning behind the festival.
It's like Holi is a microcosm of India itself. It reflects that unity and diversity that defines the country.
I think you're right. It's a festival that embraces all these different expressions and interpretations while staying true to its core values.
It's a good reminder that traditions aren't meant to be static. They're meant to evolve and grow along with us. But as we talked about earlier, sometimes that evolution comes with challenges. We've mentioned the issues with synthetic dyes and cultural appropriation. Are there any other modern-day concerns surrounding Holi that we should be aware of?
Yeah, there are a couple other things to consider. One is the environmental impact of Holi, specifically the Holika Dahan bonfire.
Oh, right, because they use a lot of wood for that, don't they?
They do.
Uh-huh.
And that can contribute to deforestation, which is a big problem in many parts of India.
Yeah, that's a valid concern. It seems kind of counterintuitive to celebrate a festival that honors nature with a practice that could potentially harm it.
It does. But thankfully, people are becoming more aware of this issue. And many communities are taking steps to make the bonfire more sustainable.
Like, what kinds of things are they doing?
Well, some are using alternative materials for the bonfire, and others are planting trees to offset the wood that's being used.
Oh, that's great. It's good to see people taking action to minimize the environmental impact.
It is. It's a positive step towards celebrating Holi responsibly.
It's like Holi is going through this period of self-reflection, trying to find its place in a world that's constantly changing.
I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
It's a tradition that's deeply rooted in the past, but also very much alive in the present. It's facing new challenges and adapting to new realities. But it's doing all of that while staying true to its core values.
So even though it's changing and adapting, there's still something essential about Holi that remains constant.
There is. At its heart, Holi is a celebration of life. It's about embracing joy, letting go of negativity, and connecting with others. And those are universal human desires that transcend cultural boundaries and time itself.
It's like in a world that often feels so divided and chaotic, Holi offers us this moment of escape, a chance to reconnect with our shared humanity and find joy in the simple things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that even in the midst of challenges and uncertainty, there's always a reason to celebrate, to connect, and to embrace the vibrancy of life.
That's beautiful. And it speaks to the power of traditions like Holi that manage to capture what it means to be human.
I agree.
Ah.
So I think now that we've covered the broader context of Holi, it's time to dive into some of the more nuanced aspects.
Okay, I'm ready. What do you have in mind?
Well, let's shift our focus now to some of the specific rituals and symbols that give Holi its depth and richness.
Sounds good to me. Let's do it. All right, so let's talk about those rituals and symbols. I know you were saying there's some stuff that's not obvious just from, seeing pictures of the color throwing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even that act of like smearing color on someone's face, it goes way beyond just, having fun.
Mm-hmm.
In the context of Holi, it symbolizes acceptance and like dissolving social barriers. You're creating a connection through that shared experience.
Right. It's like the colors themselves are representing, those things we've been talking about, unity, forgiveness, all that.
Exactly. And it's cool how those rituals connect back to the legends, too. Like, think about the Holika Dahan bonfire.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a random fire, right? It's like a symbolic reenactment of good triumphing over evil. It's about getting rid of all the negativity and making space for renewal.
Yeah, just like how spring replaces winter. It's like taking that idea and making it into something tangible.
Right. And even the color throwing. It's like a playful way of showing that divine love between Radha and Krishna. It's about joy and devotion, but in a way that everyone can participate in.
I'm seeing how Holi really blends those different elements, the sacred and the playful. It's not just one or the other.
It's a really unique combination.
Mm-hmm.
And that balance is something you see in a lot of Hindu festivals. But Holi really emphasizes it. It's about finding balance in everything, between being serious and lighthearted, between tradition and innovation, even between our inner and outer worlds.
Yeah, it's like Holi is saying, hey, it's okay to embrace all of those things. Find joy even when things are tough. Celebrate life even when it's messy.
Exactly. And add that messy, chaotic side of life is definitely part of Holi. It's all about letting go of inhibitions, stepping outside of your comfort zone, just being in the moment.
No worries about what other people think or how you look. Just pure joy and freedom.
Yeah, but of course, even with all that freedom, it's important to be respectful.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure everyone feels safe and comfortable.
Right, so there are still boundaries, even in a celebration like this.
Absolutely. It's about finding that balance between letting loose and being mindful of others.
And that's probably even more important now that Holi is becoming more global and people from all different backgrounds are participating.
For sure. Cultural exchange always requires that sensitivity and that willingness to learn and adapt.
Well, I think it's safe to say that we've learned a lot about Holi today. It's so much more than just a colorful party.
It really is. It's got all this history and spiritual meaning, but it's also constantly evolving and changing.
It's a really beautiful blend of the old and the new. And through it all, you can see that universal desire for connection and joy.
Yeah, it's like a reminder that no matter what's going on in the world, there's always a reason to celebrate and connect with each other.
What a great way to end our deep dive. I hope everyone listening has gained a new appreciation for this amazing festival.
Me too. Holi is a true testament to the power of tradition and the beauty of human connection.
Thanks for joining us today, everyone. We'll see you next time for another deep dive. All right, let's do this. Today we're going deep on T.E. Lawrence, Lawrence of Arabia. Our listener has provided us with his Wikipedia article.
Excellent.
So we're going way beyond just that classic film, right?
Absolutely.
We're going to try to uncover, well, who was this guy? Who is this man behind the legend? You've probably heard of him, that dashing figure in the desert. But did you know he was an archaeologist?
Oh, yeah.
A writer. Even joined the RAF under an assumed name twice.
That's right. His life was really, really something else, full of these fascinating contradictions. I mean, if we want to even begin to understand him, we got to go all the way back to his pretty unusual childhood.
Okay, so let's do it. Let's unpack these early years. The article mentions he was born in Wales, the illegitimate son of an Anglo-Irish landowner.
Right.
It's not exactly your, storybook start.
Not at all. And it doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
Imagine constantly being uprooted as a kid, living in Scotland, the Isle of Wight, France, Jersey. I mean, maybe this constant movement kind of explains why he was like drawn to the desert later,
Yeah.
Like maybe he was always seeking a place to belong.
It's an interesting thought for sure. Like his early life was just this constant search for stability, and maybe that search kind of continued throughout his whole life, even as a kid. I mean, his interests were pretty clear. The article says when he was 15, he biked hundreds of miles across France just to study medieval castles.
I mean, that's some dedication. But it also makes you wonder if maybe that intense focus on the past was also kind of a way to escape his present,
Mm.
But either way, yeah, that fascination with history, with especially the medieval era, that played a huge role in the choices he made.
For sure.
I mean, he ended up studying history at Oxford, even wrote his thesis on Crusader castles.
So it sounds like even from a young age, he was like captivated by these grand narratives of the past, these echoes of empires and conflicts. And that fascination, it led him straight to the Middle East before World War I, right?
Right.
Where he started working on archaeological excavations.
And that period, that's absolutely crucial to understanding him. It wasn't just about digging up artifacts. It's where he gained this intimate understanding of the region, the people, the politics, everything. It's like, knowledge that would become invaluable during the war.
It's like a real-life Indiana Jones story, right? Yeah. I mean, the article even mentions that his archaeology work was sometimes a cover for military surveys.
Oh, yeah?
Like he was gathering intel for the British right under the Ottomans' noses.
Exactly. He was laying the groundwork, absorbing everything. And, this brings us to his role in the Arab Revolt, which is, well, obviously a big part of his story. But we need to peel back the layers here. Look beyond the myth, the historical context.
Right, because everyone knows that image, right? Lawrence of Arabia. But the Wikipedia article, it paints a picture of a much more complex political landscape. You've got Britain making all these promises to the Arabs.
Yeah.
And then you have that secret Sykes-Picot agreement going on in the background.
Exactly. And that agreement, it was made, right while Lawrence was out there fighting alongside the Arabs. And it completely betrayed their hopes for independence.
Wow.
And, it really sowed the seeds for a lot of the conflicts that we see in the region today.
It makes you question, like, the whole nature of heroism, right? I mean, was he a liberator, or was he a pawn in a larger game?
It's a great question. I mean, he was definitely caught in the middle. Trina, honor his commitments to the Arabs while also navigating the interests of the British and the French.
Yeah.
Talk about a rock and a hard place.
And speaking of his military role, the article really highlights the capture of Aqaba in 1917. Like, instead of this head-on sea assault, which would have been really difficult, Lawrence led the surprise attack from the land, which was incredibly risky, but it paid off.
Yeah, that was a huge victory. And it really showcases his knack for unconventional tactics and his ability to inspire those around him, to inspire his Arab allies. But even with that victory, even capturing Aqaba, it couldn't overcome those big political realities we talked about.
Right.
Like, in the end, Arab independence, it was undermined those agreements,
Hmm.
despite Lawrence's best efforts.
It makes you wonder, how did all of this impact him personally?
Right. I mean, this is a guy who fought for something he believed in,
Yeah,
and then to have it all kind of fall apart.
it's got to be rough. And that leads us right into his post-war life, which is when things get even more complicated, right? I mean, you have the Lowell Thomas show, which, with its portrayal of the Arab Revolt, it basically catapulted Lawrence to this huge fame.
Right, and that's when that romanticized image, that Lawrence of Arabia persona, that's when it really takes hold. But we have to remember, I mean, this is a guy who was dealing with PTSD, disillusionment. He both embraced and rejected this public image that was being created around him. What a fascinating internal struggle.
It's almost tragic, right? I mean, this man who had these grand adventures, who was seeking anonymity, and he joins the RAF under these assumed names,
Right.
maybe hoping to find some sense of belonging, maybe a way to escape his past.
Yeah. I mean, his desire for anonymity, coupled with this constant need for purpose, it's really striking.
Yeah.
And he did find some solace in the structure, in the discipline of military service,
Okay.
and of course in writing.
Right.
But even then, even in the RAF, he couldn't sit still.
He was always looking for something more.
Oh, yeah, he was not content just being an aircraftman. The article says he actually championed the development of faster rescue boats.
What?
Ah.
After witnessing a seaplane crew drown? I mean, so you have this aircraftman advocating for maritime innovation. That's classic T.E. Lawrence. Never stop searching for a challenge.
Always pushing those boundaries,
Yeah.
challenging himself, maybe even trying to outrun his own past.
And then, well, this leads us to the controversy surrounding Richard Aldington's biography.
Right, because Allington, he didn't hold back at all.
Yep.
Like, he really went after Lawrence, questioned his accounts, accused him of fabrication.
He did, and his work definitely tarnished Lawrence's reputation. But even Aldington, he had to acknowledge Lawrence's, unique abilities. But the thing is, history is rarely black and white. Separating fact from fiction when it comes to Lawrence, it's a process. It's full of debate, nuance.
It feels like we've just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
But it's so compelling, right? Because we're seeing these glimpses of Lawrence that go way beyond just that of Arabia image. We're seeing the scholar, the soldier, the writer, a man who's wrestling with fame, disillusionment, and honestly, his own complex nature. He was so much more than just that dashing figure in the desert. He was a brilliant mind, a scholar, a man trying to reconcile his actions with his ideals. But to really understand him, to really get him, we need to go beyond just the biographical details. We need to dive into his own words.
You're talking about his masterpiece, 7 Pillars of Wisdom.
Exactly.
That's where we're going to pick up in part 2 of our deep dive.
I can't wait.
Stay with us. Okay, so we're back and we're ready to really get into T. Lawrence's own words, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Last time we talked about his book, 7 Pillars of Wisdom.
Right.
And we kind of left off saying that was the way to really understand this guy.
Absolutely. I mean, this is his magnum opus.
Okay.
It's more than just, a typical war memoir. 7 Pillars of Wisdom it's a window into Lawrence unfiltered. You see his thinking, his motivations, his struggles, everything. It's really a philosophical reflection on leadership, on identity, even on the nature of war itself.
That's pretty intense. I'm curious, like, what specifically in his writing makes it so unique? You said it's more than just a war memoir. So what other layers are there?
Well, for one, the prose is just amazing. I mean, Lawrence, he was a gifted writer, right? And his descriptions, the desert landscapes, the intensity of battle, they're just so vivid.
Okay.
But beyond that, it's how he digs into these psychological and moral complexities of war in a way that it was really groundbreaking for the time.
Yeah, the Wikipedia article, it does mention that there's been some debate about the accuracy of 7 Pillars.
Right.
Some people claim there are some, embellishments, exaggerations.
Yeah, some of his accounts, they've definitely been challenged over the years. Like biographers have, uncovered certain discrepancies. Like, for example, there's this famous camel ride across the Sinai.
Okay.
Lawrence claimed he did it in 49 hours nonstop.
Wow.
But his notebooks, they tell a different story.
Oh, so maybe he took a few artistic liberties, but wouldn't you say that his core message, his experiences, and like the emotional weight of the story, that still comes through?
Absolutely. 7 Pillars offers this raw, honest look at the psychological toll of war. It grapples with the moral complexities of the Arab Revolt, the clash of cultures, and this heavy, heavy burden of responsibility.
Yeah.
And Lawrence, He doesn't shy away from his own flaws, his moments of doubt, his despair.
You really do get a sense of the man behind the myth, behind that image,
Yeah.
which, kind of leads us to the heart of this whole thing.
Right.
How much of Lawrence of Arabia was really a carefully constructed persona,
Right.
and how much of it was the real guy?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
And I think you have to remember, Lowell Thomas, his stage show, it was a media sensation,
Oh, yeah.
filled with these images of Lawrence in those flowing Arab robes. It captivated audiences. He presented this almost mythical version of events.
And Lawrence, I mean, he was already wrestling with his own internal conflicts. He almost became like a reluctant icon.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost Shakespearean, right? This clash between public image and private turmoil. A man who craved anonymity becomes this larger-than-life figure, a symbol of adventure and heroism.
Hmm.
It really makes you wonder if maybe that contributed to his actions later in life.
But wasn't Lawrence also accused of exaggerating his role in the Arab Revolt?
He was.
So how do we reconcile that with this desire for anonymity?
That's the paradox of Lawrence, isn't it? On one hand, he wants to disappear,
Yeah.
to blend in, but on the other, he creates this grand narrative in Seven Pillars, which undoubtedly shaped how the public saw him.
Yeah.
It's possible, I think, that he was just battling these conflicting impulses his entire life.
It's definitely a fascinating puzzle. His story, I mean, it just had all the elements that capture people's imaginations, exotic locales, these daring exploits, a touch of mystery. But Seven Pillars, it reveals this much deeper, more human side to Lawrence.
Yeah, and that's why he's still so captivating today, I think.
Yeah.
He wasn't just this dashing hero, right? He was a brilliant mind. He was a scholar, a tortured soul grappling with the consequences of his actions. Even after the war, he couldn't find peace. He enlists in the RAF under a false name, seeking refuge in that routine and discipline. It's almost as if he was trying to outrun his own fame.
I mean, it's kind of wild to imagine, right? Lawrence, this legendary war hero, trying to just blend in, be an aircraftman, maybe fixing engines while secretly, yearning for the desert.
Yeah.
What drove him to constantly seek out these new challenges, these new identities?
It's a question his biographers have been wrestling with for decades.
Yeah.
Some point to, his illegitimate birth, the constant uprooting of his childhood, the psychological scars of war. The Wikipedia article even hints at, his complex sexuality.
Right.
The rumors, the speculation surrounding his personal life, which could have also played a role, of course. And then you have the Daraa incident, which he describes in Seven Pillars. I mean, that was a brutal assault, both physical and sexual, and that undoubtedly left some very, very deep wounds.
Oh, absolutely. And these experiences, they clearly shaped how he saw the world,
Yeah.
and the choices that he made. It's no wonder he sought refuge in anonymity, in physical challenges, in that camaraderie of military life. I mean, he was a man of contradictions.
Yeah.
Searching for belonging, for meaning in a world that often felt, pretty alien to him.
And even his death, right?
Yeah.
In a motorcycle accident at the age of 46, I mean, it seems shrouded in mystery.
Right.
Was it a simple accident or something more? I mean, the conspiracy theories, they abound.
Yeah.
But the truth, like so much of Lawrence's life, it remains elusive.
I think what's undeniable is his impact, both while he was alive and even long after he was gone. I mean, he was a catalyst for change in the Middle East.
Yeah.
He was a figure who inspired admiration and controversy.
Well, I mean, that's true. Right.
I mean, his writings, they continue to be studied, debated, reinterpreted.
They do.
His story, it serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of hero worship, about the complexities of war, about the enduring power of myth.
Yeah, Lawrence's life, it was a real testament to the power of the human spirit, its capacity for good and evil, and this constant search for meaning, for identity.
And it's something that we all struggle with, right?
We do.
So we've covered a lot of ground, but there's still more to explore.
There is.
So join us for part 3 as we dig deeper into Lawrence's legacy,
Okay.
the debates surrounding his actions, and what his story really teaches us about ourselves. Welcome back to our deep dive into the life and legacy of D. Lawrence. It's been quite a journey.
It really has.
We started from his unusual beginnings, went through his pivotal role in that Arab revolt.
Right.
From his literary success to him seeking solace in anonymity.
Yeah. We've explored so many different facets of this guy, this complex and enigmatic figure.
Yeah.
But I think there's still so much to unpack, right?
Right.
So in this final part, I think it's important to shift our focus a little bit, to
Okay.
look at what his story means for us today,
Hmm.
to look at his enduring legacy and the debates that still surround his actions.
Yeah, that's a good point. One thing that really stands out to me is just the sheer power of his myth, right?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
I mean, Lawrence of Arabia has gone way beyond, just historical facts. It's become this global symbol of adventure, of romance, of the allure of the
And
exotic.
it's that image of him, right?
Yeah.
In those flowing Arab robes, leading those daring raids across the desert. I
Yeah.
mean, it's captured the imaginations of so many. But as we've discussed, the reality was much more nuanced, much more complicated. He was a man of his time, shaped by the political machinations of empires, the brutality of war, and his own internal battles.
Yeah, it's a reminder that history isn't just, about those grand narratives and romanticized figures.
Yeah.
It's about real people grappling with impossible choices.
Yeah.
And speaking of choices, Lawrence's actions, while they're often seen as heroic, they weren't without their moral ambiguities.
Correct.
Like the Wikipedia article, it mentions his involvement in the Tafas massacre, which was just a brutal event.
Yeah, that event, it definitely casts a long shadow on his legacy.
Yeah.
Reminds us that even those we put on pedestals, they're capable of great darkness. We can admire his courage, his brilliance, but we also have to acknowledge the complexities, the contradictions inherent in his story.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not about erasing the past, it's about understanding it
Yeah.
and all of its messy reality.
Yeah, it is a challenge, isn't it? Trying to separate the man from the myth, appreciating his achievements while also grappling with his flaws. How do we reconcile those contradictions?
Well, I think it's crucial to avoid those simplistic judgments.
Hmm.
Lawrence, he was neither a saint nor a villain. He was a deeply human figure caught in the cross currents of history. His story, it compels us to question the very nature of heroism, the burden of leadership, and the often unintended consequences of our actions.
Yeah, and it forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about colonialism, the broken promises made to the Arab people, the enduring legacy of those betrayals. I mean, these are issues that still resonate so deeply today.
They absolutely do. Lawrence's story is not just a relic of the past.
No.
It speaks to contemporary issues of power, of identity, of the clash between cultures.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, what does this all mean for our listeners? What can we take away from this exploration of T. Lawrence?
Well, maybe it's an invitation to move beyond that romanticized image, right? To dig deeper into the historical context,
Right.
explore those political realities, the human costs, and the perspectives of the Arab people whose voices are often, marginalized or even silenced in those dominant narratives.
It's a reminder that Lawrence, for all of his brilliance and flaws, was just one player in a much larger and more complex story.
His life was a real testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, its capacity for both good and evil, and that constant universal search for meaning and identity in a world that's often defined by conflict and uncertainty.
Exactly. We hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to keep exploring the fascinating and often troubled life of T.E. Lawrence. Remember, history isn't just about dates and battles. It's about understanding the forces that shape us, the choices we make, and the legacies we leave behind. Until next time.
All right, let's dive in. Today's deep dive is all about Patagonia, and I know you're eager to uncover its secrets.
Oh, there are plenty of secrets to uncover, that's for sure.
You sent over a bunch of interesting stuff too, like articles, some research papers, even the Wikipedia article on Patagonia just to get us started.
A good foundation.
Yeah, perfect place to start. So using all that, we're going to explore everything Patagonia. We're talking about the origins of its name, the people who live there and live there now, those dramatic landscapes everyone's always talking about, and even what's driving its economy these days.
And maybe even a few myths along the way.
Oh, myths. I'm intrigued. Like what?
Well, how about the myth of the Patagonian giants? It's a tale that captivated Europe for centuries. really captured their imagination.
Giants. Okay, you got my attention. But before we get into all that, maybe let's take a step back. Where does the name Patagonia even come from?
Right, the basics. Well, it all starts with Ferdinand Magellan, his voyage back in 1520. When his expedition reached the southern tip of South America, they came across the Tehuelche people.
The Tehuelos.
Yeah, an indigenous group who were native to the region, and they were known for being pretty tall, taller than the average European at the time.
Ah, so that's where the giant thing comes from.
Exactly. Magellan's chronicler, Antonio Pigafetta, even described them as being twice the height of a European. So you can see how those early accounts might have, well, maybe they exaggerated things a bit.
I mean, just a little, right, a little taller than average. Suddenly they're giants. So wait, Magellan just decided to call the whole place Patagonia because of them?
Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. Magellan, he may have connected the Tehuelche with, get this, with a fictional giant named Patagon from a popular novel back then. It was called Primelion of Greece.
So the name Patagonia might come from a fictional giant.
It's a possibility. Shows how these stories and perceptions can really shape history.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Magellan kind of messed up a bit.
Well, messed up might be a bit strong, but it definitely highlights how exploration and colonization were often driven by European perspectives, which weren't always accurate.
It's important to remember that, yeah. But those giants, they really captured people's imaginations, didn't they? I mean, the myth persisted for centuries, right?
Oh, yeah, it did. For centuries, people were fascinated by them. You can picture those old maps, with drawings of these huge Patagonians and all these stories going around about their strength and strange customs.
Crazy. So how did the myth finally get debunked?
It took some time, but later explorers like James Cook, they started to provide more accurate descriptions of the Tuwelege, more realistic.
Thank goodness for James Cook, setting the record straight.
It's a good lesson about not always believing everything you hear, right? Even if it's a really good story.
Absolutely. But it makes you think, though, about how all these early encounters really shaped the way people view Patagonia, even today.
That's a great point. And it's interesting because many Patagonias today, they strongly identify as Patagonias, not necessarily as, Argentinians or Chileans, even if that's where they live. It's like Patagonia has its own unique cultural identity.
I like that, Patagonia, standing strong with a personality of its own. And speaking of personality, the landscape there is supposed to be pretty dramatic.
Oh, it is. Imagine this. You have the Andes Mountains to the west, these huge peaks, glaciers, crystal clear lakes, forests. Then to the east, you have these wide open plains, kind of steppe-like, that seem to go on forever.
Wow. You're really painting a picture here.
And don't forget about those ice fields. They're some of the largest outside Antarctica.
Yeah, you mentioned those before.
Mm.
They must be incredible to see in person.
They really are. Just these vast expanses of ice shaped over, thousands of years by glaciers.
It's hard to even wrap your head around that kind of time scale.
And all that ice, it feeds into these amazing lakes and rivers. It's really a sight to see.
You're making me want to book a trip right now. But before I do, I got to know more about Patagonia's history. I mean, we've talked about Magellan and the Tehuelche, but people have been living there for a long time, right? Way before Europeans showed up.
Oh, absolutely. We have evidence of people living in Patagonia going back at least 10,000 years.
10,000 years. Wow, that's a long time. What kind of evidence?
Well, there are archaeological sites, artifacts, but one of the most fascinating things is the Cueva de las Manos. It's a cave in Argentina with these incredible paintings on the walls, mostly handprints, hundreds of them.
Handprints.
Yeah, handprints. Some of them date back to 8,000 BC. Just imagine people living there that long ago, leaving their mark on the world.
It's mind-blowing. So those handprints, they're like a direct link to Patagonia's ancient past. What about other indigenous cultures? Were there many different groups living there?
Yeah, Patagonia was home to a whole bunch of different indigenous cultures.
I bet they had to adapt to some pretty challenging environments, right? I
Yeah.
mean, Patagonia's a big place, so a lot of different landscapes.
You got it. And each group had its own unique way of life.
That's what I'm really curious about. Like, what were their lives like?
Well, in the east, for example, you had the Tehuelche, who we talked about earlier. They were nomadic hunter-gatherers, mostly following the guanaco herds across the plains.
Makes sense. Guanaco were like their main source of food and everything, right?
Pretty much. Their clothing, their shelter, a lot of their tools came from guanaco. They were experts at hunting them, too.
So the Tehuelche were all about the plains. What about the indigenous groups living in the west, near the coast?
Ah, the West Coast was a whole other world. It was all about the sea. Groups like the Chono and the Kaweskar, they were incredible seafarers. Imagine navigating those fjords and islands in canoes made of bark.
Seriously. Bark canoes. Sounds risky.
They were incredibly skilled, though. They could handle those rough waters, no problem. And they fished, of course, and harvested shellfish.
That makes sense with all that coastline and those islands.
Yeah, they had a deep connection to the ocean. It was their lifeline.
So it sounds like before Europeans showed up, Patagonia was this tapestry of different cultures, each perfectly adapted to their own little corner of this vast landscape.
It was. It's such a fascinating history. So much to uncover.
And uncover it we will. But first, a quick break. We'll be right back to continue our Patagonian adventure.
Looking forward to it.
Me too. Stay tuned.
It really was a mix of cultures, each one so different. But then, well, everything changed when the Europeans arrived.
Yeah, that's usually how these stories go, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Not always for the better either.
Sadly, that's true, especially in Patagonia. When Argentina and Chile started expanding south in the 19th century, well, they didn't exactly respect indigenous lands.
Yeah, I was reading about that. Lots of conflict, displacement.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
was a really difficult time for the indigenous people.
Do you want to maybe talk about some of those key events? I mean, what really stands out in all this?
Well, there's one event that it really stands out for its brutality. It's called the Conquest of the Desert.
That sounds ominous.
It was. It was a campaign launched by the Argentine government in the late 1800s. The goal was to crush indigenous resistance and gain control of Patagonian land.
Basically, just take it for themselves, huh?
That's one way to put it. It was a dark chapter, no doubt, and it had a devastating impact on the indigenous communities. Their way of life was destroyed, their lands were taken away, their cultures were threatened. It's a reminder of the human cost of colonization.
Definitely. A story that needs to be remembered for sure. But during all this upheaval, I read that something else was happening, something that would change the economic landscape of Patagonia forever: sheep farming.
Oh, yeah, sheep farming, that was a big deal. In the late 19th century, it just exploded, especially in the Pampas and the southern plains of Argentina. Those vast estancias, those sheep ranches, they popped up everywhere.
It's amazing how quickly it transformed the region.
It was a huge economic engine. All that wool, it was a major export for Argentina.
I've seen pictures of those sheep herds. Absolutely massive, like a sea of wool.
Exactly. But sheep farming isn't what it used to be. In recent decades, it's faced some challenges.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, the global price of wool has dropped, and then you have competition from other countries producing wool too. So many of those estancias, those traditional sheep ranches, they've had to adapt to survive.
So what's filling that economic gap? What's driving Patagonia's economy today? I'm guessing tourism plays a big role, right? I mean, those landscapes, the wildlife, it's all so captivating.
You are absolutely right. Patagonia has become this global tourism hotspot, and it's no mystery why. People want to see those glaciers, the mountains, all that incredible wildlife.
Yeah, like that Perito Moreno Glacier. I've seen photos, but they don't do it justice, I bet.
It's awe-inspiring, seeing those huge ice walls calving into the lake. It's just incredible.
I can only imagine. What else is there for tourists to see?
Oh, there's so much. You've got the Valdez Peninsula. It's a haven for wildlife. Whales, penguins, sea lions, all kinds of amazing creatures. And then there's Ushuaia, the southernmost city in the world.
The one in Argentina, right?
Yeah.
The gateway to Antarctica.
That's the one. It's a real hub for adventurers and people who just want to experience the end of the world.
Sounds like there's something for everyone in Patagonia.
Absolutely. But with all this tourism, there are some concerns too.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Too many tourists, that can't be good for the environment.
Exactly. There's always that risk when a region becomes popular so quickly. You need to be careful. It can strain the infrastructure, put stress on delicate ecosystems. And sometimes, well, tourism can lead to this cultural commodification, where things lose their authenticity.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
So how do you find that balance between economic benefits and protecting Patagonia's natural and cultural treasures?
That's the big question, isn't it? Sustainable tourism, that's the key. Minimizing environmental impact, working with local communities, making sure tourism benefits them directly.
It's about more than just bringing in money, then.
Exactly. It's about respecting the place, the people, the culture. But it's complicated. There are no easy answers. But there's another big factor in Patagonia's economy we haven't even talked about yet: the energy sector.
Oh, right. I read that there are significant oil and gas reserves in Patagonia,
Yeah.
especially in Argentina, right?
That's right. Patagonia has really become a key player in the energy sector, especially since they discovered those vast oil and gas reserves, including shale formations.
I've heard about those shale formations. Aren't they difficult to extract?
They can be, but with techniques like hydraulic fracturing or fracking, it's become possible to access those resources.
Fracking. I know that's been pretty controversial,
It has. There are a lot of concerns about the environmental impact, things like water contamination, seismic activity, and the release of methane gas.
which is a major greenhouse gas, right?
Yeah.
So not great for the climate.
Not at all. And in a place like Patagonia, which is already vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, well, it raises a lot of questions.
Yeah. It's a lot to think about. On the one hand, you have the potential economic benefits, but on the other hand, you have the potential environmental risks. It's like a balancing act.
A delicate balancing act, for sure.
And it's not just about the environment either. It's about the people, the communities, especially the indigenous groups who have called Patagonia home for millennia. They've already been through so much.
You're right. Their rights and well-being need to be front and center in all of this. They've faced displacement, cultural suppression, the loss of their ancestral lands. It's crucial that any development, any economic progress happens in a way that respects their heritage and ensures a fair and just future for them.
Couldn't agree more. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Patagonia, I'm wondering, what's the one big takeaway you hope our listener walks away with? What's the key message here?
I think it's the fact that everything in Patagonia is connected. The landscape, the history, the people, the economy, it's all intertwined, and you can't really understand one without the others. And the decisions that are made today, they're going to have a huge impact on Patagonia's future, on the lives of everyone who calls it home.
That's a powerful message. It's a call to action, really, to approach Patagonia with respect, with understanding, and with a commitment to sustainability.
Exactly.
But before we say goodbye, is there a final thought-provoking question, something we haven't explicitly discussed that you'd like to leave our listener with, something for them to ponder?
How about this? Knowing what we know about climate change, about the growing demand for resources, and the need to protect Patagonia's incredible biodiversity, what does a truly sustainable future for the region actually look like? Can we find a way to balance economic development with environmental protection and social justice?
Those are some big questions.
Yep.
And there are no easy answers, are there?
Not at all, but it's a challenge worth tackling.
And I think our listener, with their curiosity and passion for Patagonia, well, they're up to the challenge.
I agree. And this deep dive, it's just the beginning of their exploration.
Exactly. There's so much more to learn, to discover. Books, documentaries, articles, you name it. And who knows, maybe someday our listener will even have the chance to experience the magic of Patagonia firsthand.
I hope they do. It's a place that stays with you long after you leave.
I bet it is. It's been a real pleasure exploring Patagonia with you today.
Likewise.
And to our listener, keep that curiosity alive. Keep asking questions, keep learning. Until next time, happy exploring.
Farewell.